everyone, my name is Kimberly. I'm part of the EAOP staff right here, one of the online tutors. So today we're going to be going over some AP Psychology test prep, and we're going to be looking at social psychology. So go ahead and look over these key terms. If you notice any of these key terms, that's really good. It's a great sign because then that means you know some of these. This takes about 7 to 9% of your exam, so it's important to know these people and these terms. So right now we're going to be looking at group dynamics. So what group dynamics is, it's a phenomenon that we observe when people interact. So an example is like a social facilitation or a social inhibition, and we're going to see what that means in a little bit. Social facilitation means increase in performance on a task that occurs when task is performed in the presence of others. So that means, for example, if you're playing sports, people tend to do better almost. Or social inhibition is the presence of others actually makes performance worse. So maybe if a parent is watching, then the athlete might get nervous and then they might not do as well as they would have otherwise. The other term we're looking at is social loafing, which is a reduced effort group members put into a task as a result of the size of the group. For example, like when somebody is lifting a box, it takes a lot of effort, but if you're one of the four people lifting, you might not put as much effort. And then we have group polarization, which is an interesting effect of being in groups, and it's the exaggeration of our initial attitudes. So for example, if you might be angry at something and then other people are angry, then all that put together makes you feel more angry. Then we have GRIT, graduate and reciprocated initiatives in tension reduction. So this encourages groups to announce intent to reduce tensions and show small behaviors as long as these reduced tensions and behaviors are reciprocated. So it's like a method to resolve a conflict between two groups. And then we have groupthink, which is members of groups are so driven to reach unanimous decision that they no longer truly evaluate the repercussions or implications of their decisions. And then mind guard, which may take on the responsibility of criticizing or even ostracizing members of the group who do not agree with the rest. So if somebody disagrees, maybe a whole group might then like almost join together and be like, oh no, you're wrong type of situation. Now we're going to be looking at attribution. And what is attribution? Dispositional attribution is when we attribute a person's behavior to his or her internal personality or character rather than the situation the person is in. So let's say somebody had a long day and then like they're stuck in traffic or something and then they're really angry. Somebody might say, oh, that person's just a mean person because they're angry. Whereas situational attribution is a little bit different, because then people attribute a person's behavior to the situation rather than his or her internal disposition. So if we're looking at the same person in traffic and they're upset, they might say, oh, it's because he or she is in traffic rather than because they're a mean person. So then self-serving bias is sees the cause of actions as internal or dispositional when the outcomes are positive, or external or situational when the results are negative. So it's like when things are good, you might take responsibility for that, or when things go bad, you might blame it on something else, like, oh, the bus was late or some sort of situation like that. Then we have fundamental attribution errors, which is the process of judging the behavior of others, and people are more likely to overestimate the role of dispositional attributes and underestimate the role of the situation. So think back to what dispositional attributes and kind of think about what this really means. So it's just kind of pretty much saying you're judging people based on like who they are and not enough on the situation. And then there's the self-fulfilling prophecy, which is the expectations that to help others, and it can influence the way that others behave. So for example, if John is repeatedly told that Chet is really funny, when John does meet Chet, he may treat Chet in such a way as to like think that he is funny. And then we have the Rosenthal effect, which is especially true in education. An experiment explored self-fulfilling prophecies. Now we're looking at interpersonal perception, which is the tendency to positively evaluate a person and then to gravitate towards that person. And positive evaluation refers to the fact that we all like to be positively evaluated, so therefore we tend to be in the company of people who think highly of us. And then shared opinions is the basis for interpersonal attraction. are typically thought of as a form of social reinforcement. So mere exposure effect, people tend to prefer people and experiences that are familiar, so similar. So for example, you're more likely to buy a brand of potato chips that you have seen like on TV and advertised versus one that you haven't, even though it might be the same kind of chip bag. Now we're going to look at conformity, compliance, and obedience. Conformity is a tendency of people to go along with the views or actions of others. So Salam Ash performed studies on the nature of conformity, and he found that in 1/3 of the cases when people gave an incorrect answer, the participants conformed to that wrong answer. So if like the main person was like, oh, it's A, but the answer was actually B, the rest of the group might not necessarily say something. So, and then compliance is a propensity to accede to requests of others, even at the expense of your own interests. And then there's obedience, which is performing an action under the orders of another another person. Or one example that's really popular is the Milgram experiment. We'll be talking about that a little bit. And then we have the foot in the door phenomenon, which is making small requests in order to gain compliance and eventually work up to big requests. So for example, if your friend, if you get your friend to give you $5, then he or she might maybe give you more next time. So like I said, we're going to be talking about a little bit about Milgram. Stanley Milgram is an American social psychologist, and what he studied was how people were compliant. So participants, they were led to believe that their job was to administer shocks. So if we look at this picture right here, this is a student in the electric chair, and then this is the person, the experimenter, the authority, like the scientist, and then this is the person that they are doing the experiment on. So then this person right here, the one sitting in this supposed electric chair, didn't actually receive shocks, but they were supposed to scream every time the participant shocked them. And the scientist told them, like, oh, keep going higher and higher. And then the participant pretty much like kept going on. So a very high percentage of people actually kept doing it, showing that people will listen to authority. So the major conclusion from this study, like this is really what you have to keep in mind, is that people tended to be obedient to a figure of authority, but only if certain criteria were met. So examples like if the person came in as a scientist rather than like somebody that looked like a grad student or some sort of thing, or even physical distance. There's actually a video on YouTube that you can watch. It's really helpful. I'll show you a little clip of it. So this is what it looks like.
Psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to a electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Alright. So personally, I'm a visual learner, and watching the YouTube video really made it clear. So if you have time, go ahead and just look up that video. We're going to look at attitudes and attitudes change. Attitudes are a combination of affective and cognitive reactions to different stimuli, and persuasion is the process by which a person or group can influence the attributes of others. Central root to persuasion is a method focuses on facts and the content of the message to convince the listener. And cognitive dissonance is when attitudes and behaviors contradict each other. People experience unpleasant mental tension. And Leon Feistinger studied this phenomenon. He concluded that people are likely to alter their attitude to fit their behavior. So pretty much like you might be more quiet in a situation that where people are generally like more quiet and things like that. Then we have organizational psychology, which is the equity theory, which proposes a view that where workers evaluate their efforts versus their rewards. And then we have human factors. Research deals with the interaction of person and machine, and the Hawthorne effect, which is where workers being monitored for any reason work more efficiently and productively. Alright, so what is antisocial behavior? Antisocial behavior is a behavior that is harmful to society or others. For example, prejudice is a negative attitude towards members of a particular group without evidential backing. Aggression, which is a behavior directed towards another with the intention of causing harm. And then we have stereotypes, which is the prototypes of people, which can be harmful by leading us to incorrect assumptions. So you might know some stereotypes that you might have heard of. And then we have outgroup homogeneity, which is every member of a group other than our own is similar. And then we have illusory correlation, where we tend to see the relationship that doesn't exist. So for example, noting that people of a certain ethnic group are apprehended for crimes while ignoring that people of the same ethnic groups also do positive things for society. So those are some things that you might have already heard that you might see in everyday life, but that it is a part of social psychology. Now we're going to look at contact hypothesis, which is where groups with stereotypes about each other would lose these stereotypes if the groups were exposed to each other. So that pretty much means if two of these groups that have stereotypes about each other were to hang out or meet each other, then they would realize that stereotypes are nothing but like socially constructed. And then we have hostile aggression, which is emotional and impulsive, and it's typically induced by pain or stress. And then we have instrumental aggression, which is aggression committed to gain something of value. So for example, there might be violence between two siblings because one has the ball and the other one wants it, so they might like push them. So aggression so that they could gain that like item or possession that they hold valuable or want. And then we have dehumanization, which is the ability to recognize that victims of violence are somehow less than human. And then we have Phil Sombrano. He studied dehumanization phenomenon, and he did a prison experiment where a group of Stanford students were assigned to either play the role of a prison guard or prisoner. That's a really key experiment, so you're going to want to keep that in mind. If you want to do more research about this, it's a really cool experiment to keep in mind, or interesting actually, the results and how that all played out. So we're actually going to go into a little bit of review now, so let's do that. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask through our Gmail and through, our Gmail would be the best. Okay, so what does the following scenario display? Bill does not hire John because John was half an hour late for his interview, and Bill believes that John's lateness is a result of his laziness and lack of respect for job. In reality, John was late because he got a flat tire on the way to the interview. So this might be something that you see on the AP exam. You would have options, and you might have said the fundamental attribution error. So this is an example of the fundamental error because it's the tendency of people to overestimate a person's personal disposition and to underestimate the situational circumstances when evaluating another person's behavior. We talked about this in part 1 of social psychology, so if this doesn't make sense, go ahead and go back, or just again, like, feel free to ask us any questions. Then number 2, so this is something that you might see on the AP exam, not this exact same question, but the format of it, where it gives you a scenario and then it gives you like, what is this? So an old woman carrying packages has tripped and fallen on a busy urban sidewalk and is having trouble getting up. The fact that few people are likely to offer help is referred to by social psychologists as an example of illusory correlation, diffusion of responsibility, cognitive dissonance, altruistic orientation, or just world bias. So again, go back, make some flashcards that might be helpful, kind of think about what this might be. If you need more time to think about these questions, feel free to pause the YouTube video. So the answer is diffusion of responsibility. Again, we talked about that in the first half of the AP Psychology review, so if you have any questions, again, feel free to email us. So good luck on the AP exam and study hard. Flashcards always help. That was the best for me, and it still is. So remember to look at the links below, the presentations and other helpful links. So please also like and subscribe, and yeah, we're more than happy